week 13 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few kickers. I have his sleepers this week. The first kicker, John Parker Romo of the Minnesota Vikings. Parker Romo out there in 92% of fantasy leagues. He's getting an opportunity over the last 3 weeks with Will Renchard out, and he's made the most of it, including 2 big field goals. In week 10, he hit 4 field goals in that ball game, 12 fantasy points. Week 11, it was a down game for him. He did miss an extra point, 4 fantasy points. And then last week, a game-winning field goal in overtime at the Chicago Bears. So 2 out of 3 games been a kicking for this Minnesota Viking teams. He's had double-digit fantasy points. And this week, after 3 games in a row on the road, it's his first home game as a Minnesota Viking for Parker Romo. So indoors, obviously, always great. Don't have to deal with the outside elements, and it's easy to kick the football, and you get more power behind it as well. So this week versus Arizona, where their defense has been bend but don't break over the last few weeks, I think Romo is going to get more opportunities once again, and it wouldn't be surprising to me if he had double digits for the second week in a row, and he's out there in 92% of fantasy leagues. Next kicker, Blake Rupp of the New Orleans Saints, and Blake Rupp out there in 96% of fantasy leagues. Seen some big games out of him this season, and this week a good matchup versus the Rams. I give up the 12th most fantasy points to kickers on the season. So an indoor game, home once again for this New Orleans Saints team, coming off the bye. And I think this offense is going to play good, and there'll be opportunities here for Blake Rupp. So the last few weeks, week 9 at Carolina, 11. Week 10 versus Atlanta, 7. Week 11 versus Cleveland, they scored all 5 touchdowns in that one, so only 5. But this week versus the Rams, where their defense has been decent at times, I think he's going to have to settle for some field goals. And we know Grupp, he's got good range. From 50, 55 yards, he could kick that football. So this week, if you need a kicker in deeper leagues and a sleeper option, Grupp definitely is one this week. And the final kicker I have is a sleepers, Matt Gay of the Indianapolis Colts. He's been an accurate kicker for many seasons. He got a big contract a few years ago, leaving the Los Angeles Rams and signing on with this Indianapolis Colts team. And pretty much weekly, he's going out there, and he's been a solid kicker, available in 83% of fantasy leagues. Week 9 at Minnesota, 10. Week 10 versus Buffalo, 6. And Week 11 at the New York Jets, 14. And Week 12 versus Detroit, 4 fantasy points. And for the most part, 6 to 10 point range, I believe Matt Gay could get for fantasy owners. Right now, it's a decent matchup at the Patriots, where at times their defense holds opponents to only field goal opportunities. And I think this could be a grinded out game where both kickers and Joey Sly and Matt Gay get opportunities in this ball game to put up some decent points. So right now, I think Matt Gay, he's been a solid kicker for many seasons. I know the fantasy points always aren't great for him, but this week with a decent matchup, and he's been playing good football of late, he's a sleeper option this week. So that's a few kickers. I have his sleepers for week 13 of the fantasy football season.